Hey, friends, if you're looking to get fit, stay fit, and maintain your health and energy as you age over 50, then today's podcast is for you. Joining me on the podcast today is Deborah Atkinson, who has 40 plus years as a fitness expert and has helped over 275,000 women flip the second half of their life with vitality and energy that they want. She's a best-selling author of You Got It, Girl, the After 50 Fitness Formula for Women. Debra also hosts Flippin' 50 TV and the Flippin' 50 Show, and She Means Fitness Business podcast with over 3.5 million downloads. She's a prior senior lecturer in kinesiology and subject matter expert recognized by the American Council on Exercise, AARP, the Washington Post, Prevention Magazine, and the USA Today, just to name a few. She has a famous TEDx talk that's entitled Everything Women in Menopause Learned About Exercise May Be a Lie. And in today's podcast episode, we are dipping into some of those lies and misconceptions that you may have when it comes to toning up, staying healthy, and getting in shape. So please enjoy my discussion with Deborah Atkinson. Deborah Atkinson, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. It is such a pleasure to be with you today. And I really want to start off our conversation talking about those women north of 40, north of 50, who are really struggling to maintain healthy habits, maintain their health. What are some, after working with hundreds of thousands of clients yourself, what are some misconceptions out there and some mistakes people and women, particularly in midlife, find where they're losing their energy and not, it's costing them their energy and it's costing them their health?
Yeah, such a great question. And if we can really go back to the foundation of that question, I want to challenge that thought for a lot of people listening. First of all, don't cut yourself short in that you have no motivation. You can't stick with it. You don't have discipline. I hear that so often. I think our real challenge is, first of all, knowing what are the right habits right now. Because what I learned in my young adult life is still in here. We still have that because it was anchored at a time when this was what we thought. We believed it for so long. And we had a different set of hormones then than we do now. Science has progressed. And so we know more than we did. So I think there's a lot swarming around. And then there's the conflicting advice on anything online. Once online, lives online. So there's old information there. So even if you go there looking for the most current, you may not be finding that. I think we all have to address AI as well. We have a chat bot we started using on our site, and we love it. And then I hate it. I'm like, guys, this is outdated. It's sweeping my site, but it's getting wrong information. We haven't done that for 2 years. So AI is not perfect. And if you're resorting to some of those things, it's no wonder, that we struggle to change habits first of all, and most because I don't think we're sure what they are.
Yeah, that's great, because we can also become, I find, information overloaded and just feeling overwhelmed. Well, this site says this and this says this, and I should start here. But wait, this person's doing and saying this. And, all of that can feel heavy, weigh us down, and prevent us from taking action. So speaking of taking action, what are some action steps you recommend women around 50 or midlife start taking to really invest in their energy, their bone health, their mental health, their brain health, all of that?
Well, there's lots of actions we could start with. I think the very first one is a bit of inaction, and it's take inventory. Where are you now? What would you really like to change? And then in another column on that paper where you're doing this in your imaginary head or you're doing it for real, what are you willing to change? Because I think, we could give you a great list of things, but if you're not willing to, give up certain habits, if I said, coffee's not really great, it's going to spike your blood sugar, it's the caffeine, it's not what you put in it, or alcohol is probably going to contribute to belly fat. If you're not willing to give up your wine or your coffee, and we could be talking about 25 other things. But if you're not willing to give those up, I think you really have to first take a good look at that and say, within this realistic realm, here's what I'm willing to do. And then start there with what I want. But we need to know hard numbers and soft numbers, both. So
Mm.
I'd love to, if I'm going to help somebody and they're starting to say, what can I do? I first have to know, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing that's not working? Because we need to start there, not just say, here's the ideal, because it may not be true. And what else is true for you? So I love to know questions like, yes, your weight, your body composition, that's your percent body fat. Please don't confuse that with BMI, not the same, not as valuable. BMI doesn't tell you the whole story. I like to know, if we can, skeletal muscle mass. What is it now? And never, ever in the future do I ever want you to lose that. If anything, we're going to gain it. And then lots of subjective things like, what's your level of sleep? Are you getting to sleep, staying asleep? Are you digesting, eliminating well? And oddly enough, for a strength and conditioning coach, for a medical exercise specialist who specializes in menopause fitness, these are questions that clue me in a lot about how I would start an exercise prescription for you based on, okay, have you been exercising and is that working or not working? But we decide sometimes the exercise needs to help you sleep, or the exercise needs to help you do something else. And we can't just start and think performance and exercise in a silo.
Mm, yeah. And when you speak to exercise, I'm speaking from what I struggle with. And then I know other listeners of mine struggle as well. It's this love-hate relationship that I've had with exercise, still working on helping my brain come along to loving it more than hating it. But it just feels, for so long, it was like, I should do this. It's
Mhm.
recommended to get, the 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week. So do you have some strategies that you use when
Mhm.
people are coming at it from the should perspective, or this
Mhm.
mandate that they give themselves when it
Mhm.
comes to getting in exercise?
Well, I think we all need to come back to a lot of reasons why we're motivated for anything is, what's the why behind that? And, the most important of those is a cry why. So, so we keep asking an irritating question. What's important about that? What's important about that? Because it's not just my why is because I want to lose weight. Why is that important? And most of the time it comes back to a cerebral kind of a thing. It's because I believe, I'm going to look better, feel better. I will be more confident in my own skin. I'm going to be happier. We have things associated with it. So there is definitely that. We've gotten away from just trying to get people to do a quota. And the quota changes, by the way, when you're in midlife. It's not necessarily 150 minutes of exercise. If that's trashing you and you're exhausted, I would say you say, no, I'm not doing that. We have to remember, how do you feel is a pretty good question. Somehow this has flown out the window. Everybody's talking about doing the zone 2 training or doing hits, and it may not be what you need right now, and you're getting feedback every day in how you feel, how you sleep, how you're thinking, that the exercise you're doing may not be working. So it's a temporary deviation and a detour to get back on track eventually, but you won't, by keeping driving down the wrong road, get to your destination. And we, intelligent women sometimes don't think about that closely enough. So I think one of the biggest pieces is, why is this important? We like to get to bucket list things, and it's pretty smart. I turned 60 this past year, and something really freeing about being 60 is like, you start not to really care what anybody else thinks, and you start thinking there's a little urgency here. Like, I'm on the other side right now, and there's less time on this side than there probably is on the other side. Now, I don't know. We can live to 120 potentially, but I want all of them to be good. I want all those breaths to be good breaths. So I'd rather, conk out doing something fun than live forever in a bed. But we try to host retreats. And as a part of it, it's a whole package. It's the runway leading up to it. Like we're now training for something. I'm getting you ready so that at the retreat, you enjoy it. You're actually doing things that are a little stretchy, maybe make you a little nervous. You aren't quite sure it's going to go really well. You know, it's going to be hard. But those are the things that afterward, you've now memories.
Yeah. And I like what you said, embracing some of the hardness. It doesn't all have to be hard.
Yeah.
Embracing some of the hardness because it's in that challenge that we give ourselves that we, change our perspective on something or see that we are capable, and change our beliefs and our limiting beliefs that we have about things. So I love how you hit on that part. What is your thought around when people are like feeling like I can't get to the gym or I'm not making time and they want to hire a trainer or they just rely on maybe going to the next doctor visit and the doctor says, well, you're getting a little up there and you maybe should take the weight off or your liver function tests are not doing so well. And they kind of wait for someone else to motivate them or give them the LFT elevations to say, hey, now is the time to cut back on alcohol. What are your thoughts about trainers and physicians and using people outside of you to kind of instill this motivation?
Well, I think use anybody you can. But I also think ultimately, if you have a good trainer, you have a good doctor, you have a good coach, they're not being a cheerleader. They're asking you internally how it feels and getting you to acknowledge yourself. I think that's really hard for a lot of women. We're used to having, been maybe it's the leader at the office and you're a CEO, you run your own business and you're in charge and you're a cheerleader for everybody else and acknowledging what they've all done. Or you're doing so with your family. But it's really hard for women, often, not always, to acknowledge something good they've done for themselves. I mean, anybody here who's ever deflected a compliment, as soon as somebody says you look great, oh, I could lose a few. I mean, like immediately, like I can't look too good. We can't just, we struggle to just take it in. And so, I'm really adamant about this with our community coaches. I'm like, please don't say, I'm so proud of you, because it's not your business to be proud of them. Like, say, how does that feel? What's that feel like when you hit that, when you did that? Where's that like? Or what's it feel like now compared to where you were just a few weeks ago? Getting them somehow to reflect and say the words themselves. I think for each and every one of us, that is a really important distinction.
Yeah. What do you think is so challenging about accepting a compliment?
I think, a lot of women grew up old school, and I'm hoping that the younger women are maybe looking at us like you have two heads, and that's okay. But I think a lot of women who are 50 and over grew up in an era where you're supposed to be quiet and you look good and you don't boast, you don't brag, you're not in the spotlight. And you certainly don't toot your own horn, so that's a new thing that I think a lot of women now emerging as leaders, even later in life, still struggle with just a little bit because you have to. The world has to know about what you're doing and how you can help them. You have to toot your own horn. You have to promote yourself, and they can struggle with that and kind of want to sit back in the shadows. And yeah.
Yeah, that visibility, could certainly bring up certain kinds of emotions, like you said, or certain kinds of programming that we were trained as a society or even within our individual families, that, don't stand out, right? Yeah. This leads me to my next thought is, what is that basic framework that you work with women in midlife, and how is it different from the framework of the younger version of them?
We do this, and I'm so glad you used that word, framework. It's like a framework, a blueprint, because we all have to start somewhere. And the best start is, like I would say, Sherry, what are you doing now? If you want to change, you feel like it's not working, in the last 3 weeks, what's been your average? What's a week of exercise look like? That's the best place. And then I am mentally matching it for someone who is what I would call an apparently healthy midlife woman dealing with hormonal changes. And that means maybe everything isn't perfect, but you're not like dealing with adrenal insufficiency and really just dragging and struggling to get out of bed, or you work out and then you need a 2-hour nap. I mean, there's things suggesting exercise will need to be a part of your life, but movement first, and some other things probably need to be priority first to get you to the starting line so you can really start that program.
Mm.
We look at, it's a 2, and maybe it's 1. We do twice weekly strength training. We do twice potentially hit, and that's one that we peel that off the top if somebody's not quite ready for it. And we're walking every day. So we've got everyday movement. And once that's there, that's twice weekly strength training, it's twice weekly hit. And for those junkies who really love endurance exercise, and I'm one, once a week, go for a long hike, do something long, whatever that is. For some, it's biking, hiking, but love that. I want that fix of how I used to go forever when I was 30, you know. So that's kind of the framework. And here's how it's different than quotas. So, if you think about this, I'm sure you were taught this in health studies at one point, 20 to 60 minutes at least, 3 to 5 times a week of cardio, 2 to 3 times a week of strength training for major muscle groups. So that's not such a deviation from that. Mobility every day. We don't want to deviate from that either. But there are also some other things. So within that resistance training or cardio, the hit was never there. We told you, and I'm sorry, and I'm apologizing right now to everybody. We told you to be in that middle zone, that target heart rate zone, which we actually know now is where cortisol accumulates. And you don't get that coincidental, it's going to come down after you exercise. After 45 to 60 minutes is kind of the line, but if you're brand new to exercise, it could happen sooner. Cortisol continues to go up and you're not allowing it to come down. Cortisol should be like boom and then release, boom and release. It's like have to give a speech at work. Speech is over. Have to, dash and catch my plane. Caught it. I'm done. Or didn't catch it, but still done. So stressors are meant to be like that. And now we're constantly connected. We have this chronic cloud of stress anyway. And we're in midlife. We have stress of hormonal chaos. That exercise is the one stressor that we can manipulate. It should roll up and down compared to these other stressors in my life. So if you happen to be caregiving for an older parent, you're, traveling a ton for work, it may be the time to actually bring that exercise down a notch. And that will help you be in the best shape. It's not that you're going to park your goals. It's actually that, in balance with everything else. I need some doses, and it even could be hard if it works for you, but I can't do the same as when life is humming right along and it's kind of easy. I've got to change things. So when my mom, for instance, was going through her final months of life, we knew it. She had a brain bleed. So that was going to, eventually change things. I was out of state. I don't think it matters if you're a child in state, out of state, you're caregiving, or you can't get there. It was a tense time. And what I found, ironically, is that I could do hits. And so I actually was able to do that more frequently. But that 20 minutes of, including the warm up and the cool down of just like purging some of that adrenaline, it took that for me to actually be able to focus and get through the day. And I couldn't go for long walks, and someone else, maybe the opposite. And so we have to test this for ourselves just a little bit and know, what it is. But You've got to be willing to pivot and just use the feedback and the data. Your body's giving it to you every day, all day, and what we have to remember is exercise was never meant to be punishment. It was never meant to make you feel miserable, exhausted, too tired, too sore to do life. It's supposed to make life easier, even the day you do it. You're not supposed to not be able to go up and down stairs. That's just a sign. It's too much. It's ridiculous. And we forget that too. Oh,
Mm,
this is a positive thing. It's supposed to be positive. And so it's just, that's your clue right there. It's not working. I think we have to be in the sweet spot. And often that means maybe some of you listening are not working hard enough. And others of you may actually be working too hard. I work with a lot of women who are that in that too hard range. And they know at this point, many women have been in a part of our community and they're like, I love this. And if I'm not where I want to be, I know I'm part of the problem because I keep doing a little more than I should. And at least, that awareness is really important.
mm. Yeah, the too intense, right? Always more is better.
Not
Yeah.
as much the intensity, unless we're talking intensity that comes from volume. We've
Mm,
mistakenly interpreted volume, which over 40, we need more volume. Over 50, we need more volume, but the volume should come from intense work, not volumes of it,
mm,
like another day a week and also 45 more minutes. And what do we tend to do, at least in America? We'll do both, like another day a week and 45 more minutes, and we just go overboard thinking, defaulting, maybe not thinking. Thinking isn't probably the best word. We're defaulting to that limiting belief that's probably still there about it. If I burn more calories,
mm,
I will win. Yeah.
mhm. So just re-summarizing what you've said
Mhm.
there is the 2 days a week of resistance training. Are you doing upper body and lower body on both of those days?
Great question. Yeah, I'm a big fan of total body. And again, that differs from a lot of people in that, I'm a believer that, first of all, the literature is there. Unfortunately, it's not there on menopausal women, which is the most valuable to us. But across all bodybuilders, figure competitors, studied total body workouts give you 8 times the metabolism boost than split routine does.
Mm,
And somebody who's doing math out there as a CPA is going to say, but if I do the upper body and then I do the lower body, I'm getting total body if I split them up in different days. But this is where one and one doesn't make the same two. So if I give you a big bolus on a couple days, we've really gone up. But if you have a little bolus, you haven't gotten over the hill. You haven't stimulated that metabolism enough. But what you may have done is really like put a dent in your endocrine system. Your adrenals and your cortisol had to pick that slack up because you were going to go working hard again. And postmenopausal women may be able to do that better. When you're perimenopause and you're on that roller coaster ride, that will probably not work as well. It's better to have those focused days and then have adequate recovery because that's one thing that is probably the most underused component of fitness at any age. But we won't get away with that if we're not going totally into recovery. So, with total calories, with the amount of protein, with the rest between sessions, with the stress that we have, we're watching right now as you record, of course, and it's been an Olympic year. I mean, most of them, that's their job.
mhm.
I guess we've seen a couple of medical students, right? It's a gold medal, but I really, when you look at, most of them have a lot of support. They have sponsors, they have people, and they're investing, and this is, really their thing. Like this is their moment. And so, we don't, most of us live like we're going to go work out and then we're going to eat bonbons and grapes and relax on the couch and have somebody else do the vacuuming and get the groceries and all those things. We've got life to deal with too. So we've got to factor that in. So between those workouts, really recovering, I'm not intending to suggest don't move. So movement is active recovery. It's just you're going to complement that really hard thing with a lighter thing, maybe walking, and you could still do high intensity interval training because they're two different kinds of stressors. But those kinds of things are much more appropriate in terms of I'm going to hit it when I do a set. I lift the weight, I put the weight down. So your recovery, even within that set, and similarly with HIIT, instead of an endurance just ramping up the cortisol, you're going to use it and then you're going to recover completely. You're going to use it and recover completely. So it's a different way to use your energy system and your endocrine system. So it's not quite so taxing.
I like how you broke down the upper body, lower body combos on the days that there is resistance training. Follow-up question to that was when you talk about HIIT, there's some classes that some people recommend 10 minutes of HIIT, 20 minutes of HIIT. There's some classes at my gym. It's 50 minutes of HIIT and the cool down and warm up is very minimal. Is there an optimal time frame that you find that our bodies really benefit in that midlife range?
Such a great question. This applies to all ages. It's not just women in midlife, but women in midlife because we have got the volatile hormones. Our navigational buoys come closer together. We can't just, I've got latitude to do this. We have to kind of get it right. And we've got to really tune in to, I can't let it go too far south because I will be on the couch and I'll have to stop exercising for a while. So we want to get this right, but the most important piece to remember is we want to look at the risk of injury. And what we saw, in the late 90s, that's when spinning came out and HIIT and Tabata were these were new terms to us. But since the onset of HIIT has been really mainstream, everybody uses it. The injury rate went up by 144%. So it was just coinciding. And we know that women who lose estrogen, even if you're doing HRT, it's potentially not exactly the same as your own natural high peak, are more at risk for connective tissue injuries. I think if you sat down with a circle of your friends who are in midlife, plantar fasciitis, hip bursitis, frozen shoulder, these things are going to come up and somebody inevitably has had one or is dealing with one right now. And so we want to exercise safely, which means do a longer extended warm up, definitely when you're going to really be doing high intensity work and, keep it limited. So there was a line at about 45 minutes of HIIT, and I'll define that a week. And at that point, the injury rates went up dramatically. So for women in midlife, that's my recommendation is look at your HIIT. And that means you could do 4 10-minute sections or segments a week if that works for you. So again, you have to come back to, does it throw you under the bus? Because if it throws you under the bus and you're exhausted, it's not going to burn the belly fat that you think that it will. You're going to have to feel good to do that. You could do that in 3 15-minute segments. You could do that in 2 20-minute. And I want everybody to hear that 45 minutes is a ceiling. It's not a quota. Nobody's saying get 45. You have to start and see, how does 10 a week feel? And when we say that, by the way, that means the work interval plus the recovery interval. So if you're going hard for 30 seconds and you recover, takes you a minute and a half to recover, that's a 2-minute cycle. So you might do 5 of those in one work. There's your 10 minutes of HIIT.
Great explanation. I like how you included that there's the recovery because I think the overachiever is just thinking I have to slog it out for 45 minutes and I'm putting in recoveries and then it extends it even longer.
It would be really good potentially to elaborate on that just a little bit because I think Tabata did come out and those of us who remember, it's 20 seconds of really hard work and 10 seconds of recovery. And, what we also need to remember is Tabata was done with elite male cyclists who were probably all of about 25. And they were working so hard. I mean, I'm talking like 180% of their VO2 max. And if you don't know what that feels like, it feels like you throw up after the intervals. And
Mm.
none of us are working that hard. So we also, for whatever reason, the entire fitness industry adopted that immediately, thinking, oh, this is going to help everybody burn fat. So I will get more clients. I'll be popular. I'll be successful. I'll help them get results. Some well intended things. But what we forgot is that there's a little thing called progression that everybody learned in college, hopefully. And hopefully, when they took their certification, and that would never be the way we should start. The work interval should be short, the recovery interval should be longer. And only when somebody actually progresses should it be 1-to-1, 30
Mhm.
seconds, 30 seconds. And then later, maybe the work interval longer than the recovery. But for women in menopause, recent research has been really insightful. And that it refers to something called HIRT, which is a terrible acronym, by the way, but it's HIRT. So it's high intensity repeat intervals. And who came up with these terms like work out and hurt? I mean, we're not incentivizing it. The whole philosophy of hurt is that they did the science, they compared it. And as long as you do the work interval, working at a high capacity, you can take whatever recovery you want and need to be fully recovered. As long as you come back and you do a high intensity interval training, you get the benefits of the high intensity interval training, whether you put that 10 seconds in there or you put the minute and a half or 3 minutes even, the benefit is there. But for my take on midlife women, the risk of injury is probably decreased significantly because you are completely recovered. You kind of know yourself again. You're not getting dizzy. You're not getting sloppy. But I also think that the benefit is probably there because feeling hard can happen in a lot of ways. But actually being hard, you working at your optimal speed, you working at an optimal resistance, that's actually training to, be in the Olympics, right?
Mm. Well, I really want to say thank you for making me feel better about my HIIT exercise because I'm noticing right now it's taking a lot more to recover as I'm in perimenopause, and I'm just not able to do the 1-to-1 like I used to and just crank it out and feel great. It's like, woof, that was a lot.
Mhm,
And so I
mhm.
am needing a bit more recovery right now. So thank you for shining some light on that. And hopefully my listeners, if they're feeling like, oh my gosh, it's not the 1-to-1, like I have held my expectation there, there's, just to listen to our bodies and to allow, and that we're still getting the benefit when we are
Yeah,
doing the effort part.
yeah.
Yeah. So I guess this dovetails into like when we follow people for motivation and inspiration, and you are one person I look to for inspiration and motivation. So
Mhm.
thank you. But there are accounts out there in social media and even science can steer us wrong on what to do. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, yeah, and I think science is such such a broad term, and that if I point at anybody, I'm pointing at myself because if you go look at my Instagram profile right now, you're gonna read, I think it's science-backed programming. And right now, that's a dangerous term because anybody can use it, and it doesn't mean anything. In fact, I'm preparing for a lot of different audience members. So our Flipping 50 Menopause Fitness specialists are asking for this. How do I know that a piece of research is credible, that I should listen to it? What should I be looking for? And what's a good study? What's not a great study? What has the most value? But I think the biggest thing any of us has to ask is, was that done on women just like me? So in the Tabata example, for instance, everybody went crazy with that. And that was based on young athletic males. And so until we had the research to know, it does, and I can tell everybody right now that wasn't wrong, but we didn't have the science to show that. But everybody jumped in right away anyway. It does help with visceral belly fat. And yet for you, the way it's feeling in perimenopause, walking and weight training may be your best ticket if afterward, you're not feeling like you're totally recovered and you feel good the rest of the time, that's a good indicator. But I think you've got to be saying, is that based on females just like me? Was it a study that was in a peer reviewed journal? And here's the thing, if you're going online and you're looking at PubMed, they're not all peer-reviewed journals. So that means reviewed by a board of experts on the subject. Now, yes, somebody appointed those experts. Hopefully somebody is credible, whoever somebody is. But in general, if you're going to, have to pass the mustard, and get in, that's what you're looking for. And you're looking for a large study or at least a minimum of 3 studies that did the same or very similar situation and got the same results. So, a very small study or cohort of just a few people, it's information, but it's not necessarily, research based. So the other
Mhm.
thing is lead on yourself. You are a body of data. You've collected your whole life. So trust that, whether you're talking about going to a doctor visit or how you feel when you're exercising. And, if right now the looming, this is what you should do lists just feel like too much, starting with walking, and never ever underestimate the power of walking and strength training.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think that N of one, listening to yourself. And, I'm just noticing how I changed through the years and through the decades and how I need to pivot in order to make exercise work for me. I mean, one of
Mhm.
those hit sessions, I needed an hour to 2 hour nap after. One
Mm,
of the times it was an hour, the next time it was an hour and 45. I'm like, wow, this must be really draining to me. I don't know if
mhm,
I should be continuing to do this because it did wipe me out. So, like you said, giving yourself that N of one, learning about yourself, what's working for you, and then navigating and pivoting. And one thing I've been looking a lot more incorporating and finding it to be successful is this term exercise snacks that I learned.
mhm, mhm,
And, just cranking out a few exercise snacks throughout the day because I could time
mhm.
wise fit them in. Secondarily, I don't feel wiped out after doing them. It gets my heart rate up, and I feel good. Any comments about exercise snacking for midlife women?
I love them. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up in so many ways. First of all, breaking up sedentary time, we all know is going to help control blood sugar levels, whether that's due to food and or spike after meals, or it's just the stress and the conversations and taking you away from that. We're actually in the midst of creating a 10-minute series. So they're a little bit longer. And yet, even within that, this is for the days between your strength training workout and, you're walking, but you want to do something. But other than just strength or just quote unquote cardio and improving your VO2 max for longevity, we need power. We need balance, ideally dynamic balance. We need agility, reaction skills. And, we can talk about that all day and they're like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, when I do this, that's okay." But, the women in our community are all like, "Yeah, I'm terrible about putting that together for myself." Like I'm not going to think about 3 or 4 moves that give me power or that help me with agility. So we're just giving it to them and it's, plug this in the morning or plug it in even after you go for a walk when you're good and warm and you're ready for that. So now we've done some ground force reaction for my bones today, even
Mm,
though it's not a strength day. So it's finding, ways to challenge. And when you're doing those, you're also challenging your brain. I think that's part of the reason why you and I, if you take a break like that, we feel so good. It's great for your brain to be stimulated in that way.
mhm. And then my hips start to hurt, podcasting and sitting at a desk all day and,
Yeah.
all of that. It's like my body is like kind of telling me, let's move and let's
Yeah.
not just walk, but I want some a little bit more than that. So just, jumping jacks or some air squats or even lunges I do with weights. That just feels good for a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Super smart.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room. When we're talking about weight loss, the big thing out there, the big news that everybody's talking about are these GLP-1 agonists. How do you feel about them? Are they a yes or a no for you?
Yes, and right. So I think there's appropriate time for them for sure. If someone has made all the lifestyle changes, all the behavior changes, and still is not seeing results. And I want to clarify because I think for a woman in midlife, we started talking about this, that what you thought or learned in your 20s is likely no longer the thing that you need to be doing right now. It's changed dramatically based on science. We wouldn't even tell a 20-year-old potentially to do those things again. But for you in midlife at a different place, it's not the same. So, really knowing that you have changed and you're double checking and this is the right thing for me to do right now, but it's still not helping, then I think, yes, it has a place. I think, it should come with, only with behavior change strategies and somebody to work with you and coach with you so that you're getting adequate protein, you're doing resistance training, you're, dealing with if it's been an emotional eating path that got you potentially in the place where you need it right now, that you're working with somebody who's an expert on that, because simply not having an appetite is just an avoidance thing, and that's not going to fix the problem. So I've also seen working really well for a lot of people, microdosing. So using small bits of it as little as you need in order to see or get results with negative side effects. I mean, almost none. And I think that's a huge difference. But people, I think, are looking at it in two different ways. One, short game, I want to lose this weight. And two, long game, this is for longevity. Actually, I don't expect or want necessarily dramatic weight loss, but what I do want is the other benefits. And, I'm not schooled enough, but I know some experts who are, in the longevity benefit and the link to it. But there are wonderful benefits, I think, for brain, for muscle, as well as for bone.
And we cannot ignore the muscle, synthesis
Exactly.
that's needed as we go through the hormonal shifts and
Yeah.
losing muscle mass. So I agree with you in that they are beneficial, but it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at the weight loss, but making sure that the body doesn't lose the muscle mass and the muscle strength and the longevity piece and all the factors that addition go into if you're using any drug really to get weight loss. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for another group of people who maybe didn't begin with the exercise, I think that it has been like a catalyst. I've heard positive results. And, if somebody begins to feel good, they want to look for other things that continue and add to that feel good. So another, it's not the evil all the way around that we've been heard or been told. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. Sometimes it's just that one small step somebody takes that creates the ripple effect because they feel better. They're getting results. And now that creates momentum to do other positive health changes. And so I'm all for that because you want it to be something that they maintain as a lifestyle.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, Deborah, thank you so much. And as we wrap up today, I want to educate my listeners about how they can work with you in a program that you may have coming up, I believe.
Yes. So, if you're not strength training, I think if we do anything that is the most important, I think we could argue all day. Is it cardio? Is it strength training? My take on this is that the muscle gets you the ability to do everything else. The activities that you love, it allows you to do more of the types of cardiovascular activity that you do so that you can keep that longevity and the oxygen carrying capacity. So strength training is key. And for the place to start, we have a 12-week program. It's 12 weeks because I know if you're with me for 12 weeks, you're not going to want to stop because the client said to me once, feeling good feels good. Like, why would I ever want to stop this? I'm like, I'm going to write that down to say it. So yes, and it is twice weekly. So there may be a time and a place where you decide post-menopause you want to add a third time, but twice weekly seems to be a very sweet spot, like a doable spot. We have a lot of women who say, I've never been able to stick with it before this program because sometimes it's just too many times a week. It's too much, it's too long. It's like, I can't fit that in. And then we feel failure. So we won't let you do that here.
Wonderful. And we'll list a link in the show notes where you can
Great.
sign up for that program. And then if they want to follow you or visit your website, will you tell them where they can find you?
Absolutely. Flipping50.com. And that's all words spelled out. Although if you put in the number, you'll get me too. At social media, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we're on YouTube. Have a pretty robust following in all those places at Flipping50 TV. That's Flipping50 TV.
And I love your website, I have to say. There are so many resources, so many helpful blog posts, your podcast, all of the things. It's just a wealth of information on your website. So I highly encourage people to check out your website. Well, Deborah, thank you again. It's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and thank you for imparting your wisdom with my listeners.
Well, thank you so much for having me.